previewing the New Orleans Saints safety position ahead of 2021 NFL training camp getting underway. And we're joined by Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators to talk about a fan favorite and one of Brandon's favorites, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, all on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, the daily podcast covering your New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the safety position as we continue our position-by-position preview heading into New Orleans Saints training camp a little less than a few weeks away here. And we're going to take a look at that safety spot. Who are the new faces in the building? Who did the Saints lose? And who are the New Orleans Saints bringing back? As well as our projected look at the 2021 roster at the position as well. Then to wrap up the show, we're going to be joined by Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators, here to talk about one of his favorite Florida Gators of all time, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Going to talk a little bit about his personality in college, the role he played in college versus the role he played in the NFL, and if the character concerns that knocked him down in the draft were really anything to be concerned about at all. All of that coming up on today's episode. And as always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, co-managing editor over at CanalStreetChronicles.com, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. So we got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. All right, y'all. Second episode of the week here at Locked On Saints. Don't forget that we're here with you every single Monday through Friday. I don't know how many episodes you're listening to each week, how many episodes you're listening to each month, but consider adding a couple more because we're out here every single Monday through Friday for you, getting you through the off season here, making sure you got everything you need. And right now we're in the midst of a very important series here, our position by position preview. A lot of folks asked for this. A lot of folks wanted it after we did it last year. It's one of my favorite things to do as well, making sure that you are aware of every change and every name that's on the roster heading into training camp. Remember, the Saints actually still have 5 different spots that they can also add players before the end of before the beginning of training camp, throughout training camp, however it is they want to go about it. And now they have just a little bit over $11 million to do that as well. So some of these positions we'll circle back to when additions are made or changes are made. But we're going to start today with the safety position. We're going to also be visited by Brandon Olsen later to talk about a specific safety that we all know and love as well. But let's talk a little bit about the safeties that the Saints lost over the course of the offseason. Not a lot of losses here, honestly. I mean, one major loss in terms of somebody that played snaps for the New Orleans Saints, that was DJ Swearinger. But does that really change the course of the safety position for you and your team? Very likely not. I mean, he had 14 tackles in 2020, appeared in 11 games, oftentimes as the dime defender or the 6th defensive back in those systems. Only played 12% of snaps on defense, played a lot of special team snaps for the Saints. He was targeted 8 times, allowed 6 catches and just over 80 yards. That's really it. I mean, outside of that, you also lost Saquon Hampton, but you lost him at the beginning of the season. Remember, the Saints drafted him in the 6th round of 2019 draft, never really got to set in, had this great ball hawking mentality type of reputation coming out of Rutgers, but really never got the opportunity to set in with the New Orleans Saints because of injuries. So he ended up appearing in a Week 14 game after being cut at roster cuts by the Saints. He ended up appearing in a Week 14 game with the New York Jets, but then played that one game and then ended the season on injured reserve in close to his hometown, actually, in New Jersey. But it's an unfortunate history and unfortunate story of Saquon Hampton, but not a huge loss for the Saints to have lost him. And then Chris Johnson, he was on a future reserve deal at the beginning of last season, came in and then was cut at roster cuts. So those are the only 3 players that you lost at the safety position. So we're going to be talking about the safety spot here, just like we talked about the offensive line as being one of the most consistent and therefore one of the strongest positions heading into the 2021 season for the Saints. And I think you could say the same thing during our discussion of the running back room as well. A couple of additions for the Saints at this position. You've got Deuce Wallace, who was signed over the offseason. He's a University of Louisiana Lafayette grad, was unsigned and undrafted in 2020, didn't get an opportunity to operate a pro day with the coronavirus pandemic and everything that was going on. So he got an opportunity to try out during Tulane's pro day this offseason. They allowed some locals to come through. That's how the Saints got connected with Christian Montano as well as Jalen McCleskey. And then now you also see this with Deuce Wallace as well. He was a walk-on in college, turned into a team captain, and now is on his way to an NFL camp. Pretty phenomenal story. He himself has noted over his conversations with media that he's going to have to do something in special teams in order to really be able to have a shot at the roster here and plans to contribute in that way. So he's very realistic in terms of his expectations. Same thing with Eric Burrell, who joined the show here in the early goings of our YouTube days here on the podcast. Eric Burrell coming out of Wisconsin as an undrafted free agent safety. He's somebody that also sees his opportunity with the New Orleans Saints as one in special teams if he's going to make the roster. But both these guys have, admittedly, a long road to go if they want to make the roster because of the players that the New Orleans Saints are returning at that safety spot. Marcus Williams, Malcolm Jenkins, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and then, of course, J.T. Gray. And you could probably throw P.J. Williams in there as well as somebody that can play multiple positions. Marcus Williams, he's got 13 interceptions since his rookie season, or at least since week 3 of his rookie season. He leads safeties in that, according to Mike Triplett, who did a fantastic piece about Marcus Williams. Here now, less than 10 days away from the deadline to get him signed to a long-term deal to avoid him playing on a franchise tag and becoming a free agent at the end of next season. Malcolm Jenkins, listen to this. Malcolm Jenkins actually last year tied his career high in interceptions with 3. He did that twice before with the Philadelphia Eagles, and also tied his career high for sacks as well with 2.5 in this New Orleans Saints defensive system. Had the second most tackles for a loss in his career as well. So he is absolutely lighting it up since returning to the New Orleans Saints. He has an out after this season. This could be his final season. If he went into 2022, he'd be 35 years old at that time. But we've seen safeties in particular play until 37, 38 years old. Even Brian Dawkins made a Pro Bowl at 38, despite not having any interceptions, and having just over 50 tackles in that season. C.J. Gardner-Johnson has been absolutely outstanding. He's listed as a safety on the Saints roster, so I'm including him there, but we know he mostly plays in the slot for New Orleans. He had an incredible season last year. I tweeted something out earlier that you can find at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. He was targeted 77 times as a slot defender, once every 5.2 snaps. That's both of those are most for any slot defender that played over 250 coverage snaps at that nickel position. But he allowed the 6th lowest passer rating and the 7th fewest yards per target, as well as adding 11 pass breakups despite all of that attention. He's been absolutely locked down for the New Orleans Saints. Remember, he made NFL.com's list of the top 10 coverage players going into 2021 as well. And then, of course, J.T. Gray, who is your special teams ace. He's your special teams captain. He's not going anywhere, honestly. Not to get to the projection part of this early, but he's just been outstanding for the New Orleans Saints. And he actually played 10 snaps last season in the Week 17 game against the Carolina Panthers, were targeted once and had 1 pass breakup. So he allowed like a 39.3% passer rating in that game. And then again, PJ Williams, you can kind of just consider him a defensive back, but as a safety, he played 288 snaps in 2020, only 182 elsewhere at the cornerback position, whether out wide or in the slot. So next, we'll take a look at who the projected roster, or what the projected roster will look like in 2021 as we look at these safeties for the New Orleans Saints before we're joined by Brandon Olsen to talk more about C.J. Gardner-Johnson, his days in college, and whether or not those character concerns that knocked him down in the draft were actually something that any teams should have been concerned about. We have all that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Right now, the New Orleans Saints are plus 325 to win the NFC South. The division favorite, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at minus 175. So if you believe very much in your New Orleans Saints and you want to get in on those odds and a bunch of other things that you can find around the NFL, NBA, MLB, reality television, award shows, everything you can imagine, you can find it all over at BetOnline.ag, which has you covered for any sports bets that you want to place. And honestly, shouldn't even say sports bets because they do so much outside of the world of sports as well. That can be just plain fun. So go and check them out at BetOnline.ag. It's free to sign up, and they're Locked On's exclusive betting partners. They also sponsor our Locked On Bets podcast, which you can listen to make sure that you get the latest edge on everything that you need to know every day before going and placing those bets as well. So go and check them out, betonline.ag, and you can use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON when you visit betonline.ag. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, we introduce you to all of the changes to the safety spot for the New Orleans Saints. Now let's take a look at what the projected roster could look like at the position heading into 2021. So I'm going to go with 4 traditional safeties for the Saints, and maybe call this boring, maybe whatever, but honestly, it's the 4 players that they're bringing back. This safety position is one of the, if not the strongest positions for the New Orleans Saints going into this year. With so much changeover all over the defensive side in particular, you have changes at defensive end, you have changes at defensive tackle, at linebacker, and at corner. The safety position is the only position for this defense that hasn't had any type of substantial loss attached to it. They've maintained their core here and maintained a player that could have hit the market like Marcus Williams, which would have been absolutely detrimental to this defense. Tony Wiggins over at Locked On Jaguars was writing to me every time he got the opportunity. I almost said every day, but that was an exaggeration. Every time he got the opportunity to tell me about how Marcus Williams is going to end up a Jacksonville Jaguar, yet here he is on a $10.6 million franchise tag that nobody thought the New Orleans Saints would even be able to afford for a player going into this. Amy Just and I talked about it like days before they attached the franchise tag to Marcus Williams, thinking that there was no way that they were going to use the franchise tag on any position, but they used it on Marcus Williams, of all players. They lost 13 and a half sacks with letting Trey Hendrickson go. They lost both of these linebackers that, particularly a guy like Quan Alexander, who of course they weren't going to use the franchise tag on because of the fact that he was somebody that is, coming off of injury and everything. But that $10.6 million they committed to the safety position, they could have committed to the linebacker position in free agency. They didn't do that. They didn't franchise tag or try to keep any of these other players that were on their way out. And they even let Janoris Jenkins go so that they would also have the money that they needed to be able to make decisions elsewhere. It was like there was no question around Marcus Williams. So you look at what they've done to maintain this position. You already had Malcolm Jenkins and C.J. Gardner-Johnson returning, of course. JT Gray, they went and made sure that they got him back as well, bringing him back on another deal. So this is a position that the Saints care greatly about, and that is integral to the success of Dennis Allen's defense. That's one of the reasons why you've seen them go out there and do everything that they could to make sure that they kept this position together. Now, from here, you have a guy that is your takeaway artist in Marcus Williams, who has also really figured things out as a tackler, playing downhill and being a bit of what I think it was Malcolm Jenkins referred to him as more of an enforcer in 2020. So you're seeing Marcus Williams and his game start to expand. Malcolm Jenkins played a phenomenal season last year for the Saints, and that was without a real offseason to learn the playbook. Now he has an actual offseason, and he is going to be even more adept at the defense and making sure to maintain cohesion, continuity, and communication across the defense going into 2021. And then you have these young guys. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a star. There's no doubt about it. He played the star position at Florida, but he is a star in the NFL in the making. And I wouldn't even say in the making. He's a star at this point. Everyone knows this guy's name. And I know that we harp a lot, and a lot of folks love to talk about the ejections and the trash talk and stuff like that. But he's so much more than that as a football player. Remember what I said in that last segment, 77 targets from the slot. He got a lot of attention last year, but allowed the 6th lowest passer rating, forced the 7th fewest yards per target at the position, despite being targeted the most and the most often, 5.2 snaps per target. I mean, the guy was absolutely outstanding in 2020, and he's going to be even better in 2021 with another offseason, or with an actual offseason this time, working with Malcolm Jenkins to get ready for the season. A season with Malcolm Jenkins under the belt, adding the intensity of a guy like Chris Richard. This is going to be a breakout season for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, even though he may have already broken out, but now he's stepping into a leadership role as well. And then you look at a guy like JT Gray, who is your special teams unit. He's your punt coverage right now. You don't know who the other gunner is opposite JT Gray after you lost Justin Hardy this offseason to the New York Jets, who just seem to pilfer every defensive back that they can from the New Orleans Saints at any point. Arthur Millette, Saquon Hampton. And then, of course, you look at Justin Hardy. And I'm sure there have been others as well. And so you look at this and you say, okay, JT Gray is the one solid that you have in punt coverage with a brand new punter and another gunner that's going to be brand new opposite him. Could be a guy like Marquez Callaway, who excelled in that role during camp last year. Could be one of these young rookies that are coming in. Could be a guy like Jalen McCleskey. Could be a guy like Lawrence Woods, the undrafted free agent out, who we'll talk about when we get to cornerbacks, the undrafted free agent coming in. That is a absolute just dynamo when it comes to special teams, both as a returner and, of course, coming in also as a gunner coming out of Truman State in Chicago. He's incredible. So he could be that guy, but we don't know yet. So as of right now, your punt coverage unit is Caden Ellis and you've got JT Gray, right? Those are the guys that you know are consistent because Craig Robertson is out. Michael Burton is gone. Justin Hardy is gone. Those were core special teamers for you. So you still have to reload around some of those other positions, but JT Gray's your one constant. PJ Williams, I'll reference. I'm really going to lump him in with cornerbacks more than I'm going to lump him in with safeties. But again, he played over 100 more snaps at safety than he played at corner. So while I have them keeping 4 safeties, you can pretty much go ahead and lock in PJ Williams as one of the corners that stays with New Orleans because of his position versatility. You keep PJ Williams, that's one less player you need at the other position. So you either lump him in as one of 5 safeties or you lump him in as one of 5 corners. And then no matter what, you're probably keeping a total of 9 or 10 defensive backs regardless. So I think that that's where PJ Williams' versatility and value really come in. And because you lost CJ Swearinger, who played 12% of snaps as a dime back, you saw PJ Williams come in to play that role mostly throughout the season outside of DJ Swearinger. So you would just see him continue that role more than likely, whether as another deep safety or as another defender in the box. So those are your 4 safeties plus 1 defensive back in PJ Williams that I think that the Saints will keep on the roster at this position going into 2021. Going to be very hard for guys like Deuce Wallace and Eric Burrell to make the active roster, barring an injury or something else going on during the offseason. It's going to be very hard for them to break through, but hopefully one or both of them will get some type of an opportunity via special teams at either being an additional person that's held because of the fact that they can help in special teams or as a practice squad player that could potentially be elevated on game day to help out in special teams from that area. So we'll see exactly how this all pans out once we get into training camp, but we'll continue on with today's episode, getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty here with one of your favorites, one of my favorites, one of Brandon Olsen's favorites. Brandon's going to be coming through from Locked On Gators to talk C.J. Gardner-Johnson as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Speaking of consistency, there's nothing more consistent than the incredible flavors of Built Bars. And the consistency of a Built Bar itself isn't gritty and gross and like those other protein bars that you've had to muster your way through that taste like nothing but regret and have the texture of nothing but sadness. Built Bars are nothing but happiness and deliciousness. So go and check them out. 9 incredible flavors. You can get a sample box right away. Get 2 bars of each flavor. Get yourself 18 bars. Or you can do a build your own with up to 3 different flavors at 6 bars per flavor. Or you could double up, get just 1 flavor. However it is that you like, everything you want, you can customize it and make it happen over at BuiltBar.com and try their 9 delicious flavors and keep up as well with all of the incredible limited time flavors that they have that usually sell out almost immediately. So make sure you continue to check out BuiltBar.com. And when you grab yourself a box, your next box or your first box, doesn't matter, make sure you use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, to get 15% off over at BuiltBar.com. That's LOCKED15 to get 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, Who Dat Nation, continuing on today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you as always for being here. And thank you to our guest today, Brandon Olsen over at Whole 9 Sports. And of course, Locked On Gators at WNS_ Brandon on Twitter. My guy, how are you, man?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I know you're pumped. I know you're pumped about this conversation. So I'm very excited to get this going on with you. And so am I. Listen, we love Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Ceedy Duce, whatever name you refer to him as. Who Dat Nation absolutely loves this guy. But before he was a New Orleans Saint, he was a Florida Gator. Tell us a little bit about Chauncey the person, CJ the person, Ceedy the person when he was at Florida.
I mean, he was someone who like you're gonna love him or you're gonna hate him. Like he
Sure.
is not. He's one of those guys where like there's no in between. Like whether you love him or you hate him, everyone cares about him to some way. He's not someone that you're just neutral about.
Right.
Like I spoke about this with just Locked On Gators, where it's like I love him. I think he's amazing. I love everything about him. But I have fans that are like, he's terrible just because they hate him. You can
Right.
you can say his play sucks all you want, but you're wrong at that point. Like he's amazing. He's someone who, as a person, like he's always been someone who is like fun loving, like dancing around on the field, stuff like that. Like just having fun with it. And I mean, yeah, he got some slack or like some flack, I guess, from the fan base for wanting to get paid for interviews when he was getting ready for the draft. It's like literally today that just went into effect. We have to get paid, and people are upset about him just being ahead of the curve.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brandon will be back later on this week as well to talk a little bit about NIL and how it could eventually affect the NFL as well. But as we continue on with CJ Gardner-Johnson here, I mean, yeah, we know him as a fun-loving guy, and we also know him as a leader as well. I mean, he told us during his recent press conference that his next goal in terms of taking the next step is bringing the younger guys along with him. Did he have that leadership role when he was at Florida as well?
It would look like he did. Yeah. Like that. Mm-hmm. He was just one of those guys who you can tell, like he knew what was going on. He was kind of commanding what was happening back there. He was the leader of the secondary. I'll say, like when we were getting ready for the draft, like he was the guy. Like Florida always has like their secondary guy that they love, like Kaiir Elam, not Marco Wilson.
For those who don't know, Marco Wilson's the guy that threw the shoe during the LSU game in the 2020 season. So just to refresh your memory.
Yeah, CJ Henderson, Vernon Hargreaves, Joe Hayden. Like there's always that guy in the secondary.
Right.
Chauncey was that guy there. He was the leader. He was the alpha dog of the secondary. And it made it so much cooler that he was like more of a big nickel than anything else.
Right.
Like, you like that alpha dog on the outside. It's not as fun because they don't get to get mixy down low. But like you could tell he was talking trash, which is something that I love. Like I'm for the all chirp team. Like
sure.
I love that. And he's that guy. Like no one gets swung on, and he got swung on. That was amazing. Right. But yeah, he was the high energy guy that was in the slot. And he was clearly the leader of that secondary. And just, I mean, I cannot get over how amazing I thought he was as a prospect. I had him 20th overall player.
I was about to say, I know it's a point of pride that you had him as your 20th overall.
Yeah, he's my 20th guy. He was so cool coming out. Just like he played a role that was without him, that defense sucked. Like he was so relied upon just for that whole defense, not just the secondary, but yeah, that whole defense. He was just such a leader on the field. And I'm sure off the field. But yeah, he was such a leader on the field that like you couldn't operate without him. He was that important to this defense.
Yeah, and he played that star role in that defense. How close is that to what you've seen him do in New Orleans? Because again, he's a safety in the slot, just like you were referring to as being that big nickel guy. How close is the role that he had with Florida to the role that he plays in New Orleans now?
They're incredibly similar spots. That's pretty much all that stuff. Like college football has a billion different position designations on defense, and half of them do the same thing. So, it's nothing new. But yeah, he played star. He was that kind of like box safety, nickel corner, or nickel safety, whatever you want to call it. He was that guy, and he was used, I'd say, more as a blitzer in college than he has been in the NFL. That was something that I really liked about him. Just like he ran like a bat out of hell whenever that ball got snapped. He was like, you knew it was coming, and he was just like 0 to 100. He was coming for you. It's very similar to the role he's played now. It's the role that he thrives in. And he was the first person that I was like, he should be a slot corner. Like I'm not super into that always, where I'm like, oh, like he has to be a slot corner or whatever. But it was so clear with Chauncey. He would thrive in the NFL as a slot guy, and I'm still so pissed you guys got him.
Yeah, I can't believe that he fell. I mean, all the way down to outside the top 100 to the Saints in the 4th round, and the Saints getting away with an absolute steal. They are a pair of them, because this is also the same season that they drafted Eric McCoy, who just had a 1,000-snap season with the team at center. So they've gotten very fortunate with some of those drops and being able to take advantage of it, not being afraid of some of the quote-unquote attitude issues or character concerns that come with some of these players, the tags that might be a little bit more unwarranted than others. That certainly felt like that was the case with CJ.
Yeah, with CJ, it was literally just people got upset and got their they got their bridges in a bunch when he wanted to get paid for like they were like, hey, we love you so much, we want to interview you, and he's like, okay, if you love me so much, pay me. And they're like, ooh, now we hate you. And it's like, it's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Like, literally, there were so many fans that just turned on him because he wanted to get paid for being a star in the SEC. Wow. Literally as a position and like value-wise, he was a star.
All right, family, one more big thank you to Brandon Olsen at WNS_Brandon on Twitter. Make sure you go and check out the website as well, whole9sports.com. You can check out his work over at Locked On Gators every Monday through Friday. Big thank you for him, or to him rather, for coming through. He'll be back on Thursday to talk a little bit about name, image, likeness, and how the NFL could potentially feel the effects of the big progress that's being made in collegiate athletes getting paid going into the 2021 collegiate season. So we'll have that on Thursday, but coming up tomorrow, it is midweek fundamentals. So let's talk a little bit about contract restructuring. We broke down what the veteran contracts and veteran minimum deals look like. I'm inspired by Kai Harley. Let's continue to do some contract talk, how restructures work, why people warn against them, and how the New Orleans Saints continue to avoid any type of fallout when it comes to them. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow. And of course, we'll get you caught up with all of the news that you need to know around your New Orleans Saints. Thank you very much, as always, y'all, for coming through, for supporting, rating, liking, reviewing, sharing, everything that you're doing, both for the podcast and over on YouTube. I'm overwhelmed by the response as we continue here with you 5 days a week, every Monday through Friday. As always, you can hit me up on Twitter at RossJackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.